Hello Year 4, in today's reading session we'll be beginning a new book. This book is called The Explorer. You can see the front cover on the slide there. It's going to be based on our geography topic. Before we start reading anything, I want us to look at the front cover. I'm going to ask you some questions and I want you to have a think, or if you've got someone sitting next to you, you can have a chat about these questions that I'm going to ask you. We're then going to read the first chapter of the book together and I'm going to ask you some more questions about it, and that's going to be our lesson today. So, number 1. What do you think this book is going to be about? Just by looking at the front cover, have a think. Number 2, what can you see on the front cover that makes you think this? Are there any pictures you can see that scaffold your ideas and reasons for what you think the book is going to be about? Number 3, where do you think the story might be set? What clues are given on the front cover that make you think, oh, this is set in this location, or this is set in this country? Have a think, please. Your next question, what age group do you think might want to read this book? Do you think it might be old people? Do you think it might be younger people? Or do you think it's just going to be around your age group? And my final question, just by looking at the front cover, do you think you'd like to read this book? Do you think you'd enjoy reading it? And why? So if you do, why do you? And if you don't think you'd like to read it, why don't you? Hopefully you'll all think that you do like to read this book. Okay, fantastic. I'm going to start reading the first chapter because I've got the book here. I have put the pictures of the pages on the slides so you can read along. I've also included the same pages that we're using today in your document of resources, so it's all there for you if you need to refer back to it. Okay, so make sure you're comfortable and you are ready to listen. Fantastic. So, chapter 1, Flight. Like a man-made wish, the aeroplane began to rise. The boy sitting in the cockpit gripped his seat and held his breath as the plane climbed into the arms of the sky. Fred's jaw was set with concentration, and his fingers twitched, following the movements of the pilot beside him. Joystick, throttle. Joystick is like the gears, like we have in cars, and the throttle is what makes it go faster or slower. The aeroplane vibrated as it flew faster into the setting sun, following the swerve of the Amazon River below them. Fred could see the reflection of the six-seater plane, a spot of black on the vast sweep of blue, as it sped towards Manos, the city on the water. He brushed his hair out of his eyes and pressed his forehead against the window. Behind Fred sat a girl and her little brother. They had the same slanted eyebrows and the same brown skin, the same long eyelashes. The girl had been shy, hugging her parents until the last possible moment at the airfield. Now she was staring down at the water, singing under her breath, her brother trying to reach his seatbelt. I want you to think, why were they doing this? Why was she singing under her breath? And why was her brother trying to eat his seatbelt? Have a think about that. In the next row, on her own, sat a pale girl with blonde hair down to her waist. Her blouse had a neck ruffle that came up to her chin, and she kept tugging it down and grimacing. Grimacing is where you kind of pull a face that looks a bit like this. Okay, so she's looks like she might be in a bit of pain because it's up so high to her chin. She was determinedly not looking out of the window. The airfield they had just left had been dusty and almost deserted. Deserted is a bit like abandoned. Just a strip of tarmac under the ferocious Brazilian sun. Fred's cousin had insisted that he wear his school uniform and cricket jumper, and now, inside the hot, airless cabin, he felt like he was being gently cooked inside his own skin. The engine gave a whine, which is a bit like a shriek, and the pilot frowned and tapped the joystick. He was old and soldierly, with brisk nostril hair and a grey waxed moustache, which seemed to reject the usual laws of gravity. Now that means, because obviously gravity pulls us down, it makes us basically not float, doesn't it? So if his grey wax moustache is rejecting the usual laws of gravity, it means that it's curling upwards like that. So that gives you a bit of an idea of what the pilot looks like. He touched the throttle and the plane soared upwards, higher into the clouds. It was almost dark when Fred began to worry. The pilot began to belch, that means burp, first quietly, then violently and repeatedly. His hand jerked and the plane dipped suddenly to the left. Someone screamed behind Fred. The plane lurched away from the river and over the canopy, which is an area of a rainforest. The pilot grunted, gasped, and wound back the throttle, slowing the engine. He gave a cough that sounded like a choke. Fred stared at the man. He was turning the same shade of grey as his moustache. "Are you all right, sir?" he asked. "Is there something I can do?" Fighting for breath, the pilot shook his head. He reached over to the control panel and he cut the engine. The roar ceased, the nose of the plane dipped downwards and the trees rose up. "What's happening?" asked the blonde girl sharply. "What's he doing? Make him stop." The little boy in the back began to shriek. The pilot grasped Fred's wrist hard for a single moment. Then his head slumped against the dashboard, and the sky, which had seconds before seemed so reliable, gave way. Okay, that's all we're going to read in today's session. Now I've got some questions that are going to pop up in a moment, and these questions are going to be the questions that I'd like you to answer today. Now, the reason that I've included the pictures of the pages in your resources, I don't want you to just guess the answers. I want you to back your answers up with evidence. So, for some of them, it might just be a one-word answer. Maybe for the first one, what mode of transport were they travelling on? But for the second one, what happened to the pilot? For this one, Year 4, I'd want you to explain what happened to the pilot and how you know this. So what gives you that clue from the text and why do you think this? So rather than just saying, "Oh, this happened to the pilot," you might say, "This happened to the pilot because," okay? So that's what I would like you to do. For questions 6 and 7, what do you think happened to the plane? And do you have any predictions so far about what might happen next in the book? For number 6, you might be finding rough ideas of what's happened so far to the plane, but we haven't explicitly been told yet. So this is where you use your thoughts and your inference to really get those ideas out there, okay? So that's what I'd like you to do today. Use the book and use the text to help you scaffold your answers. All the answers are in here, so if you want to look back over it, look in your resources because it's in there for you, okay? When you've answered all those questions and you've answered them, remember, in full sentences, Year 4, we've been doing lots of work about that, haven't we? Then you can send it into the office and they'll pass it on to me and I'll be able to see what you've remembered about the book so far. I'm really, really excited to read in the next chapter with you in tomorrow's reading session. So until then, have a fabulous evening and I will see you in our next lesson. Bye, Year 4.